Hello, Mr. Paul here, sitting in the car at a park. I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video today, but Jesus says, ask me, because he likes for me to sometimes not decide on my own. If you decide something with Jesus and it's in accord with his will, then you won't be afraid. So I was unsure if I should do this, and so he said, ask me. So I had to let go of choosing independently and accept his guidance. And he said, you can. So here I am. And then as I came out I was going to do this somewhere else, and what I saw in my mind was a picture of this park. Sometimes the Holy Spirit gives me just a sudden image of something as a communication to say, hey, do this, or this is the answer, or whatever. So I'm at a park, and it's a nice sunny day. The sun's even coming in, and it's much warmer and nicer than it was in the last video. So today's topic is free will. And I printed out some quotes from the Course because I wanted to kind of be a little bit prepared here. In my last video, I talked about how we have individual free will in heaven, and God has given us that free will. And you can't even have a free will unless you have a self. So then the whole topic was about, do you have a self? Are you something God has created that can think on its own, and that you're not just part of one big blob of God, that you have a mind, that you can choose? So I'm going to just, I think, say that having free will also flies in the face of what a lot of people are teaching about the Course, because it implies that you have to have an individual self, and everybody thinks that means ego, and it doesn't. So the whole teaching of that you have the freedom to choose, and that there's a choice that you can make, and that God himself has even given you that ability to choose, and that he doesn't go against your choice, and that your choice has to sort of collaborate freely and willingly and agree with God's will as a co-creator. These are all things that are very covered up by some of the interpretations of the Course. So let's see here. We've got, and these are all from the text, because I tend to refer to the text only because it's often got extra words and extra sentences and things that are a little bit more in their original form, not quite so twisted and edited, so it just helps to get a bit more insight. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. So the very fact that you can elect what to take means that you are the one who authorizes and writes the script. The fact that you have the option of choosing when to accept God's truth means that you have a freedom. The fact that you even have a curriculum and you need one to get back to God because God hasn't been affected by the separation, the thing that stops him from being affected by it and by your choices, even if you are in God's mind, as a thought that seems like an aspect of God himself, there has to be something that prevents him from buying into or participating in or being affected by the separation from God, the tiny mad idea. Many people think that the mad idea hasn't happened because it's an idea of something that hasn't happened, but actually we did actually have an idea. We did, our minds did imagine a thought of what is it going to be like if I'm not like God or not like myself. We did actually have the idea, even though it was a mad idea, even though it was a thought of impossibilities and things that can't really happen. That idea did occur, and Jesus does actually say in the Course, the separation has happened. And it doesn't mean the separation is real, but the idea of it has occurred. And so now we're correcting the idea of it, and we have a curriculum that we consent to and freely, willingly say, yes, okay, I agree, I will accept having this lesson, and I'll choose that body to incarnate into, and I'll have this family. You choose it, and you have to sign off on it, sign the contract to willingly, freely participate in it, and you can get out of that contract whenever you choose, even if you're having a really shitty time of it and kind of bit off more than you can chew, or your script has sort of not become very helpful anymore or something, or you've learned all your lessons. Often people will leave the dream, or they'll drop dead and get out of the program and get back to head office because you still have the freedom. You can still petition God to sort of let you off, or to renegotiate, or to decide freely, okay, I'm done with this, I'm just going to leave now, and I'll come back and learn in a different way or something. So you can't establish the curriculum, because the curriculum is not in the book, it's not in the Course in Miracles book, it's your life, your experiences, the events that happen. But you can elect what you want to take at a given time. It's not just about, it doesn't just say you can choose when to take it. It actually says it means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. And so you get to sort of choose, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have this happen, and this lesson, and meet this person, and hopefully learn these things, and I'm going to do it here and here, and this is going to happen for me here and here. And then you come into those choices and experience them, sort of like you set them up for yourself. So there is freedom here, because your free will does not ever be violated. Your free will is something that God has given you, and it's never revoked, and it's never canceled out, and God himself does not go against your free will. It even says that in the Course. God himself would not oppose your freedom, because he's given it to you as a gift, and you're supposed to be in agreement with God's will, but it doesn't mean that you're forced to have to will like him if you don't choose to. There was one line about how Lucifer, one of the angels, chose to participate in the separation idea and believe in it, and there are many princes in the world who are actually angels that have fallen into the dream, and yet they are free to establish their kingdoms wherever they choose. So God's not saying, oh, hey, you're wrong and evil and bad and nasty for wanting to live somewhere that I don't exist. You're free to do that if you want to, and you're free to delay this curriculum if you want to, and you're free to choose what kind of lessons occur for you. And there's no forcing going on here. God's not saying you have to do this. Okay, let's see another one. Maybe a quick beverage. Never used to say beverage when I was in England. Just some water. Okay. if he places his mind under tyranny rather than authority, he's talking about you, he introduces the submission and dominance onto free will himself. So you willfully actually place your own will under tyrannical rule by denying it, trying to block your own will. This produces the obvious contradiction inherent in any formulation that associates free will with imprisonment. Each soul has a mind that God has given it. That mind has free will. The free will that God gave is in the mind, and it's a function of the mind. Because the mind has been given freedom, the mind had to be given freedom to allow the souls to freely, willingly want to create like God without any coercion or any force or any, you're just going to do this without a choice. He actually has given everyone individual free will, and each person is responsible for whether or not they go into the separation or accept atonement. And if you choose to deny that you have freedom, you place your will under tyrannical rule, and this creates a sense of being imprisoned and that you're unwilling, that you don't want to will, that you don't want to be free. Let's see what else we got. It is not your will to be imprisoned because your will is free. This is why the ego is the denial of free will. So a lot of people think free will means that you have an ego. This is a very common belief, and it's the opposite of the truth. The ego is what seems like free will is actually an illusion of free will, where egos pretend that they're being free, making choices with the will that looks independent and separate, but actually are forms of imprisonment. So on the surface it looks like freedom, but underneath you're actually confining yourself and limiting yourself and trying to choose options that aren't really there and trying to make alternatives to God that aren't really there to suggest that you have another choice. See, the problem isn't that you have free will. The problem is that if you try to use that free will in an artificial way to block God's will, it produces an illusion, a dream. It's not that you can't do that, and you have done that. This is why the tiny mad idea has been thought of. You are capable. The mind has two functions that it can do. It can extend, which is its natural agreeing with God kind of way of creating. It wants to freely, willingly extend and create things. But it also can project. And projection is what happens when you place limits on your freedom and your will and try to make something or will something that lacks freedom and shows up as forms and bodies and other stupid things. So let's keep moving here. Let's see. Free will must lead to freedom. So what passes for free will in the world in terms of the ego, like rebellion, basically, is not really free because there's so much imprisonment and limitation and conflict and having enemies and things like that that make it not free. It's actually unwillingness, and it's also wishful thinking. When you deny your will, you don't just stop having a will. You actually use your will to will that your will be blocked. So now your will's fighting against itself, and your will now causes and makes illusions that seem on the surface to be I don't have a choice, or I'm a victim, or it's happening to me against my will, or I didn't make this happen, or I'm dying against my will, or I'm sick because of somebody else, or whatever. We create these pictures of unwilling experiences, things that are happening that we're not seeming to want, made by unwillingness as a use of will to try to not will. So we're actually the ones who choose death, we're the ones who cause sickness, we're the ones who decide to suffer, and we choose to be afraid. But because what we're willing and what we're choosing and making has components of unwillingness in it, it shows up as, oh, I don't want this, and I didn't choose this, and it's happening against my will, and I'm not the one that's making me dead, and there's other causes out there that can cause me to suffer and make me die and make me sick and make me upset. And that's all an illusion. It's the ego's attempt to pretend that it has freedom when in fact it has imprisonment, to make imprisonment look like freedom, because it's back to front. Everything ego is upside down, back to front. Everybody that is afraid wants to be afraid. Everybody that is sick wants to be sick. Everybody that dies wants to die, because they're simply using their will to try to deny their freedom. Free will must lead to freedom, and God has given you profound, absolute, unlimited, 100% freedom. And that's his creation. How'd that go? God, who encompasses all being, nevertheless creates individual, separate beings who have everything individually and want to share it to increase their joy. This is what the Course says, and it's the truth, that God has fully created souls, has created them perfect, has given everything of himself to them, has been so allowing and so generous and giving and so unrestricting and so unlimiting that they have actually been fully created as almost independent creations that are now within the beingness of God, but are completely autonomous, not cut off from God necessarily, not failing to share, not being in a state of isolation and being imprisoned, but you do have your own free will, and God has created this, and he is not going to oppose it. And now, the news at 10. Let's see. Awakening unto Christ is following the laws of love of your free will, and out of quiet recognition of the truth in them. The attraction of light must draw you willingly, and willingness is signified by giving. So God has been so giving that he's given you freedom so that you can give freely, wantingly, desiringly, happily, rejoicefully love to give love and create life. And I'm in agreement with God's will. God wills to create life. I'm the same as his will. I choose the same as his will voluntarily and freely, not through coercion, not through, oh, God's putting his thumb on me and he's going to strike me down with a lightning bolt if I don't obey. That's the ego. Let's see. In reality, this is his only choice, because his free will was made for his own joy in creating the perfect. This is you. In reality, this is your own choice, your only choice, because your free will was made for your joy in creating the perfect. So God actually has created you as a free-willed individual being of light and love, that so that you, as this thing, can freely, joyfully love to create like God, in God's likeness. Everything in heaven is like everything else. There's no inequality. There's no differences. There's no things that apply to something that doesn't apply to something else. But that doesn't mean there aren't separate beings. It just means that all of those beings are identical. So here you have perfect sun, perfect sun, perfect sun, perfect sun, all looking the same, all acting the same, all choosing the same, pretty much, all having the same freedoms, celebrating together as a brotherhood. Here's a good one. You will never know that you are a co-creator with God until you learn that your brother is a co-creator with you. So, not only do you have free will in that you're an individual, but there are many individuals who have free will. You have brothers. You'll always have brothers. Jesus says he will never leave you. He's always going to be a brother. Jesus is not the Son of God. He's one of the sons of God. You are equal to him. There's nothing that he has that you cannot attain. What he has remains potential in you at this time, because he doesn't have anything that doesn't come from God, or anything that God didn't give him as his free-willed self. You have other stuff because you wanted to have something else on top of what God had already given you and the abilities that he already gave you to create. You wanted to make some shit up. Until you learn that your brother is a co-creator with yourself. So in this world, we have to learn to let go and let other people do whatever the fuck they want. You have to honor and respect their freedom, their free will, whatever they're choosing, even if they're choosing to suffer, even if they're choosing to die, even if they are being sick, even if they are seeming like a terrible victim, even if they're being abused, terrorized, murdered. Whatever that person is freely choosing, you have to allow them to have that freedom and that respect for their freedom. Otherwise, you start to ram stuff down their throat. You start to accuse them of not being right. You start to try to control them. You start trying to manipulate them. And what the ego does is it, in the guise of trying to get them to have freedom, takes away their freedom by denying their freedom, by saying you're supposed to be this way and not that way, and you're not doing it right, and I want you to change in this manner. And just this non-acceptance, the inability not to accept whatever they want to do, whatever they choose, that it's not okay, that is ego, and it's actually denying their freedom. And the reason we deny other people's freedom is because we do not believe that we have freedom. Okay, it's your own belief in being imprisoned and not allowed and not acceptable and not free and not lovable enough, and that you don't have any choice. You put that onto other people by projecting it, and now you start accusing them of not being free, and they're not choosing love, and they're not having the right choices, and so you sort of take away their freedoms. You become domineering, you become tyrannical, imprisoning, you become abusive, because that's the end result of denying freedom. Denying your free will denies other people's free will. You will never know that you're a co-creator with God until you can learn that your brother is a co-creator with you. And to be a co-creator with your brother, you both have to be in agreement and freely, voluntarily, willingly desiring to choose the same thing together, to have shared interests, not through coercion, not through threat, not through manipulation or trying to make people do things or can't accept the way they are or want them to be different, or I wish they would just wake up, or they would just get it, or they would choose the right choices. Look at how wrong they are. My son and my daughter are making bad choices. I have to stop them. And look at my neighbors. They're playing loud music and I don't like it, so they're wrong and their freedom doesn't matter. And it's not okay for somebody to be gay or lesbian because that's not acceptable, so they shouldn't be that way. And then we start to get into everybody else's business. You're supposed to be passed by, just somebody who just sort of, don't mind me, I'm just passing by, not getting involved in false empathy, messing in other people's business, getting all up in other people's faces about how they're not supposed to be the way they are or they're supposed to be different. Mind your own fucking business. I'm supposed to mind my own damn business. And I fall into this myself. I keep on trying to get people to see things and believe things and listen to things and trying to force them to accept things. Now, Jesus said to me the other day, okay, hey, Paul, you have to allow other people to willingly come to God by themselves. If you've got somebody who's really resisting coming to God and they're making themselves sick and they're trying to die and they're trying to demonstrate hatred and they're choosing drugs and alcohol or they're hurting things or whatever they're doing, there's no way they're going to come back to God unless they want to. There's no way they're going to be able to come back to God unless they want to. They have to freely, willingly have a little willingness. They have to take the steps of willing, choosing. Heaven is a choice I must make. I must accept the atonement for myself, which doesn't mean that you accept it for everybody else. You have to let people have their time. You have to give them their room and their space to express themselves and not sort of keep shutting them down or not listening or taking what they say personally. That only happens when you're not letting them. If somebody's standing there yelling at you and you don't let them yell at you, because you think that if I defend myself, I'm going to be safer. The defense attacks you, makes you feel vulnerable and hurt. You now think they're causing you to be hurt because they're yelling at you. Try this. If you just be very allowing, you don't have to subject yourself to torture here or make yourself hurt in a big way, okay? But be sensible. But if somebody's having an angry spaz, let them do whatever they want. Let them be free. Let them express it and rage. And as long as they're not hurting anybody, not including themselves, you want to step in maybe if that's a good thing to do. But if you allow them and you don't defend it and you don't block it and you don't try to refuse it or resist it or make it wrong or judge it, you actually find that you feel quite invulnerable. You actually kind of start feeling like you're not affected. You start feeling like they can't hurt you because by allowing them to have freedom, you recognize that everything they're doing is their choice. It's something that they're expressing about themselves. It's got nothing to do with your freedoms at all or your choices. So it helps you to separate yourself from, in a sense, the bad choices that other people are making. Their mistakes don't become your mistakes. You don't get lost in the fight or the attempted fight, and then you start to see people in a different way. You start to see that people aren't actually attacking you. If you can get really certain about the truth of yourself, what is true of you and what's not, and you can take responsibility for your own free will choices, you are fully 100% responsible for everything you choose and experience. Nothing can happen to you against your will. You have full freedom to will whatever you want, and you can even delay going back to God if you want to. It might not make you happy, but you do have that freedom. It sort of decouples you and helps you to step back from all the confusion that's in between you and other people, where you sort of assume that when they start attacking you, it's got something to do with you, or it's not their stuff, or especially when they start using your name and they start saying, "Hey, Paul, you fucker," and you start saying, "Well, they used my name, so they must be talking about me." They're not. They are interacting with their own internal insanity within their own mind, within their own thought system. Their ideas are not leaving their mind. Their projections are not outside of their mind. They're actually within their mind. They're talking about themselves to themselves, having a private world, pretending that they are interacting with you out there, when in fact it's entirely personal and separate from your freedom and your happiness. And you start to recognize this, if you get really clear about it, that when people start getting angry and attacking, you can see that they're hurting themselves. You can see that it's not about you. You can recognize that they're calling for love. It's not a personal issue, and you don't allow it to hurt you because you don't use it to hurt yourself, because we take those opportunities and we actually grab a hold of them and put them on ourselves because that's convenient. It allows us to pretend that it's their fault. And if you don't do that, if you don't make it personally about you, it's not actually about you. And as you get clear and you can see this distinction that they have freedom, you're co-creators, you're in a sense separate from them, you can get to some good peace, because you're now starting to have this confidence and this certainty that you're unshakable. And even when someone's having a big rant, you can actually remain completely calm in the recognition that if you're allowing them to have perfect freedom to choose whatever they want to choose themselves, and it's not your choice, and you're not responsible for their choice. Okay, this is a very important point in the course, because so many people have taken the bullshit idea of non-duality. There's only one sun, and the one sun dreams the whole dream, and therefore your perception is responsible for seeing everything that's out there. And therefore, if you see a sick person, it's something in your mind, and if somebody's dying, you must be the one thinking of or dreaming of them dying. And if you just would change your mind enough, the dying people would disappear from your dream, and then you would end up in some kind of fairy tale world where other people aren't sick and other people are not having problems. That does not happen, because there are many dreamers of the dream, because there are many individuals, and we all share and overlap in our authorship, our co-creation of this whole dream. If you wake up from your portion of dreaming, you can wake up all the way and accept atonement, while other people are not. They're still in the dream, they're still dreaming. Jesus has already done this. Him waking up did not cause you to leave your dreaming, because that would violate your free will. And he even says, God himself would not go against your will, nor can Jesus go against your will, because your will is as strong as his. and you are as free as him. I'll get to that quote here, I guess. So many people have bought into this crappy idea of there's one dream and one dreamer. It's not true. It's a very poor concept, and it's led to a lot of misperceptions about what this free thing means. If I am responsible for everything that my soul chooses freely to experience, whether I'm dreaming or not, other souls' choices are not my choices. They do not affect me. I'm not affected by them because they are perfectly free. And the ego says this means separation. That's how insane the ego is, because where it thinks there's separation is actually total freedom. Where it thinks there's like these isolated things that are imprisoned separately, kept apart from each other, there's actually freedom. These two people are completely free and independent, and nothing's keeping them apart from each other, nothing's stopping them from sharing. It's a fundamental difference in how the ego looks at that freedom and sees separation in it, instead of seeing freedom and openness and unity and willfulness and voluntary wanting to share. So many people are thinking then, okay, I'm responsible for what other people are doing in the world, and I'm responsible for their sickness, and I'm responsible for their lives, and parents are supposed to own children. Jesus says no. And you're supposed to confine people and control them and stop them from making certain choices, and don't let them hurt themselves. And it's okay to be loving and to help people not to harm themselves if they're willing to allow that. But some people will nevertheless keep hurting themselves. Some people will commit suicide regardless of how much love is around them and how many people are trying to help them. You cannot choose for other people. You can't choose heaven for other people. You can't choose the atonement for other people. When you choose the atonement, what Jesus says is you become part of the atonement. You become part of the truth, part of the plan. There is a big plan that includes many individual souls who need to get back to the sonship. You become part of that plan, and you become part of the mission, the great crusade, to help other people. Miracles are given by somebody who has more to somebody who has less. They supply a lack. And teachers come along to help students who temporarily have less, and they need to get more from those who have more. These kind of dynamics cannot happen without free will. You can't become Jesus and be a teacher and have students who need to learn Jesus's example unless those students have free will. And many people are glossing over this. It doesn't make any sense to say, Jesus woke up, therefore we're all awake. There is some truth to that at some level in some aspect of the sonship, because Jesus shares with everybody, but your soul, your individual free will, still has to comply willingly and freely. You still have to choose it yourself. If I wake up and my perception becomes truer, and I'm not perceiving and adding bullshit to the world, my mind has changed its mind about the world, and now I'm seeing better, does not mean that all these other people stop being sick. It doesn't mean that you stop being able to see them. All it means is that you become able to recognize that what's there is false. You stop believing in the sickness being true. You may still perceive it. You can still see that there's a leper over there whose leg has just fallen off. Heaven forbid. But you don't believe in it. You don't make it real, and you don't hold it against the person, and you recognize that that's what they have freely chosen, and that they want it, And they put it there themselves because of their belief in their sin. And then Jesus comes along and can see that, and can go around the people and see from an awakened, atoned state that people are believing in being sick, and that they're having sickness in the body still, even though he's awake, and that he can help them. And then he goes and helps them, and he heals them, and he restores their mind and helps them to become more awake and more communicating and more whole. Otherwise, it just turns what Jesus has done in his life into a bunch of bullshit, because we're like saying, okay, he couldn't possibly have healed anybody because they must have been figments of his imagination if he's the one son, one dreamer. And so, therefore, miracles didn't happen. It's another excuse for saying miracles aren't happening, or miracles aren't supernatural acts. It's just another stupid intellectual justification that a lot of people are making a mistake with, because they're thinking with the ego, how it thinks about parts and separations and getting rid of separations and ending up with one part. And my throat gets kind of gunky when I talk a lot, so I get sinus drainage. But we have to acknowledge that there are many sons, many souls. Each one of them is responsible for how it uses its mind, its free will, which God put into those minds. The minds are mechanisms of decision. They can decide. They can choose. They have to choose whether or not I'm going to will like God and agree with his will and be a co-creator, so that we create together freely and willingly, or whether I'm going to deny will and go into unwillingness, which produces a willfully dreamed dream of death. Okay, I just want to make sure I get through more quotes here, because I keep running out of time. I think I started on the wrong page. Okay, I did start on the wrong page. Maybe I didn't, actually. Okay, let's get some more of these. It is this thought by which the Father gave creation to the Son, establishing the Son as a co-creator with himself. And it is in the agreement of their thought that makes the Son a co-creator with the mind whose thought created him. So it's not just, okay, God wills this and you're an effect of God, fuck you. God doesn't just broadcast light, and you're not just this light that shines like a light from a light bulb. God is not the light bulb with you, the light. God creates other light bulbs. God causes other causers. God creates creators. It's the ego that has tried to say cause produces effect, and effect cannot cause other things. Or cause produces the body's an effect only, and it cannot create like its creator. This is part of the ego illusion, the separation between cause and effect. In reality and truth, God has given you the same abilities that he has. He's given you his free will. He's given you his freedom, his willfulness, his joy in creating. So now the two of you create together in agreement, like a voluntary, yes, okay, I agree to that. And when you are accepting atonement, that's what you got to get to, is where you are freely seeing the sense of God's truth. You freely, willingly want to do it. You accept it because it makes sense and because you want it, not because it's forced on you. You can't accept anything against your will. You have to actually choose it. You have to want to willingly, freely accept it. And it doesn't mean you're submitting yourself to God. It doesn't mean you're obeying. It doesn't mean you're under control. It doesn't mean you're being dominated or forced. You're free. This is free will. You're a co-creator with God. We all are. A co-creator with the Father must have a son. It's talking about you as one of God's creations, creating other creations. Yet must this son have been created like himself, a perfect being. So you're also a perfect being, because if your creations are like you and those creations are perfect beings, you're also a perfect being. So is God. All-encompassing and all-encompassed, nothing to add and nothing taken from, not born of size, nor weight, nor time, nor held to the limits or uncertainties of any kind. So you're not held to any kind of limits. You're totally free. Your creations are not held to any limits. They are totally free. You actually create things that can free-willingly create. You have children. You better pay some child support soon. You're a bit behind on your payments. Let's see. Think not he wills to bind you, God. Think not that God wills to bind you, who has made you co-creator of the universe, his universe, heaven, along with him. He would but keep your will forever and forever limitless. Okay, this is a lot of freedom going on here. There's a lot of allowing, a lot of lack of forcing. Love does not enter where it's not welcome. God can't take away your fears unless you let them go. Free will. Jesus says, your will is as free as mine, and God himself would not go against it. So in this is the essence of God's creation, why God has created many beings, many sons, many individuals with freedom, encompassed in his being, yet completely independent and autonomous and capable of thinking for themselves, choosing for themselves, and not required to choose like God, can choose to dream if they want to, and many have. Duh. Your will is as free as mine, and God himself would not go against it. So if you can get this idea, there's God, totally free. Here's a son, totally free. Here's another son, totally free. Nobody's forcing anybody else to do anything. Everybody's supposed to be respecting everybody else's freedom. Nobody's supposed to be trying to manipulate anybody else. Nobody's trying to enforce certain things, or you have to do this, or you have to be this way, or there's no bondage, there's no it's not supposed to be any competition. You're not supposed to be stopping others from committing suicide necessarily. And you got to ask Holy Spirit here, what do I do, Holy Spirit, in a situation? If somebody's trying to kill themselves, let the Holy Spirit help you know what to do, because it might not be in their best interest if you start interfering, or it might be in their best interest. It might be your function and your role to help them not to do that, but it might not be. Depends what their plan is, what their script is, how willing they are. Sometimes you have to let people go. Sometimes you have to let people choose bad shit. And that's a very, very hard lesson, especially if you're around somebody who is constantly making poor choices, somebody who's sick a lot, or somebody who's very dependent, or someone who is very violent or whatever, who hurts themselves, somebody who cuts themselves or does drugs or whatever. Very difficult to allow them to do that and to recognize their freedom and to say, okay, if that's what you want, that's your choice. It's not, I don't have any power over you. I'm not going to dominate you and take it away and force you to do something else. But whether you do something else, whether you have an intervention or you you call the police, or whether you don't let people hurt themselves if you can help it, but get some Holy Spirit guidance as what do I do? What choice do I make? Please choose for me. Help me to, and maybe that choice is I'm going to give a miracle. Maybe that choice is I'm going to raise this person from the dead, or use this situation to prove that death's not real. Or there are saints who raised the dead and other people who did so on purpose. Even as Jesus raised Lazarus, he said that the purpose of him dying was so that God could be glorified, because he could then use it to demonstrate that death can be reversed, which proves God's truth and God's life-giving nature. And so now God is glorified by this miracle. Couldn't have happened unless Lazarus died. So you don't know necessarily what's best for other people. You don't necessarily know what's in their plan or their consented to script. And this is also why death is a choice. Everybody that dies consents to it. Nobody dies without their own consent. You have to freely, willingly choose sickness, and you have to freely, willingly choose to make death happen to you through unwillingness and unconsciousness. It's a choice. You implement the unconsciousness to make yourself suppressed and suffer and die. And if you don't make yourself unconscious and you have awareness, you cannot be dead, because awareness is life. If you are fully aware, you don't have any unconsciousness, so you don't go unconscious. This is how the body is maintained in perfect health. If your mind is fully filled with life and a wakefulness and truth, it heals the body and makes it impossible for the body to be sick or dead, because you don't will it. This is the responsibility that we have to take, that I am 100% responsible for my free will, my choices. I have to accept the atonement. I have to choose heaven. I am the one that makes myself sick or dead. I have to choose not to die. I have to choose the resurrection. And I have to demonstrate miracles, and I have to be the one son of many, who freely, willingly chooses to demonstrate immortality, or to choose to go home to God. Nobody goes home to God under pressure or in fear or through sickness or death. You have to have profound willingness, not just a little bit of willingness, but full, total certainty and commitment that you freely say, not because you're forced, but because you freely say, I'm done willing other things. I now will to be with God. As Jesus said on the cross, I think, something like, I commend my spirit into your hands, Father. That's what he's saying. I choose to do your will, or to agree with your will, and I give myself back to you as your son, and I put myself back in heaven and take up my rightful place as one of your creations. Would God let this be real if he did not will to be alone himself? God didn't will to be alone. He wanted to create. He created you with free will. They remind you that you are the co-creator of all things that live. See, I'm getting toward the end here. Worth repeating, God, who encompasses all being, nevertheless, in an ego-defying way, created separate beings who have everything individually, including free will, but who want to share it to increase their joy. Nothing that is real can be increased except by sharing it. That is why God himself created you. Divine abstraction takes joy in application. Creation, I'm going to apply what I am to create another me, kind of, another God unit. And that is what creation means. God does not need revelation returned to him, which would be impossible, but he does want revelation brought to others. This cannot be done with the actual revelation because its content cannot be expressed, and it is intensely personal to the mind that receives it. You, as one son of God, were created by God like in one act. Zoom. There you are, perfect creation, free-willed. Here's another one. Here's another act of God. Zoom. Here's another son. Identical. God creates identical children. There's no inequality or differences. But it can still be returned by that mind through its attitudes to other minds with the knowledge from the revelation brings. Revelations prove that there are many sons. The truly helpful are God's miracle workers. Plural. God's, his, not egos, God's many miracle workers. The truly helpful are God's miracle workers who I direct, Jesus, until we are all united in the joy of the kingdom. So there's not just one son, and there's not just one miracle worker, and there's not just one dreamer, and there's not just one freedom or will. Everybody has their own will, and everybody's got to choose it themselves. And you choosing it, you're free to choose it in spite of other people not choosing it. You're free to choose it even if other people stay in the dream for 100 years. Other people cannot stop you from choosing God's truth. You cannot stop other people from choosing. And therefore, everything that you choose is free of other people's choices and can only share and be in agreement with them if both of you are freely, willingly choosing to do the same will, which could be a will to dream together, or it could be to do a will similar to God's will. So that's all the quotes I have. There are many others, of course, that support this. You'll find in your practice of the Course, as I have, that just a minute. The acknowledgement of the freedom of others gives you tremendous freedom. The allowing of others allows you. I, for a long time, had this constant belief and this fearing and feeling that I'm not allowed. It's not acceptable. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not allowed. And I thought, well, maybe this is because other people told me that I wasn't allowed, or they went against my will. Found out that's not the case. I didn't believe that I had freedom. And Jesus kept saying to me, you're free, you have freedom. You're free to choose whatever you want. I'm not going to force you, you're free. And I couldn't understand it, and I couldn't accept it. And I still don't, I guess. But I accept it more that it now makes sense that I actually have full freedom in the way that God created me, and that freedom is not taken away, that independence is not taken away, that individuality is not deleted by waking up. All that gets taken away is the ego, the false self, the false idea of my imprisoned will goes away, and my will becomes free again, and I actually gain freedom, I actually gain self, receive who I really am. I don't know where I was going with this, but so what I found is one of the easiest ways to apply forgiveness is acknowledging freedom. Let other people do what they're doing, let you do what you're doing, own your responsibility for your free will, recognize that they own everything they're choosing, and this kind of separates you from the illusion of there being something between the two of you that connects you in an artificial way based on the ego, like believing that they are attacking you, or you are being affected by them, or they're choosing against your will. Those are fake causes and effects on the horizontal level of the ego. This thing over here is causing this thing over here horizontally. That's a lie. You need to break that, separate those two individual free wills so that you can give back to yourself the freedom that you have, give back to them the freedom they have. And it's very simple. You just say something like, I'm not being caused by them, I'm not being affected by them, these symptoms are not caused by them, I must have chosen this myself, I'm not at the effect of the world, I'm not a victim of them, I must have wanted to feel this way, I must have created this sickness on my own. I am the cause of all the things that I'm experiencing. They're not the cause of it, therefore they're innocent. They've got nothing to do with what I'm experiencing and what I'm choosing. This totally lets them off the hook, puts all the responsibility and the power back onto you. I'm take back my power from all these people. I re-own myself. I acknowledge my freedom. I must have wanted this, and now I can choose something different. If you don't acknowledge that you're the one that chose it in the first place, you're not acknowledging that you have that freedom to choose, which the ego doesn't want you to acknowledge. But when you do acknowledge it, it gives you back the freedom of realizing, if I did choose this, and the secret to salvation is I did this to myself, not other people doing it to you, then I can choose otherwise. I can choose something different. I can choose again. I can choose to be my authentic, real self, my whole self that is not affected by anything, because there are no real connections between brothers. There is no cause and effect between brothers. Other people do not cause your free will to change. Your free will does not cause your brother to change. Everybody is independently free. You cannot affect your brother because you're both at the same level. God has created this sun. God has created this sun. There is no fighting horizontally. There's not supposed to be. So this idea of one brother can hurt another brother, they can do this to me, I can do this to them, that's a lie. And when you really pull back those ties, those fear cords, those connections that are artificial, those beliefs that something out there is affecting me, and I'm connected to them and in a harmful way, and I can't get away from being vulnerable, that's a lie. All you have to do is withdraw those lies about causality and reclaim your freedom. Let them have the same freedom. So, okay, they are not being caused by me. I did not do this to them. They have chosen this themselves. They are making themselves hurt. They are upsetting themselves. This is their problem. This is their choice, their free will. They are doing this to themselves. And therefore, I'm innocent, and nothing that they're experiencing came from me. This puts the two boxers back into their corners, stops the fighting, brings peace, because you do not affect your brother, and your brother does not affect you, because you're both free. You're individually free, and this is very natural, and this is what you acknowledge when you're applying forgiveness. What you're doing is undoing this fake causality, this reversal of cause and effect, and you're putting the cause back in your mind. I'm the cause of this. Everything I'm experiencing, I've caused, not them. So whatever they're experiencing, they must have caused, not me. That breaks the connection in between us that's fake and is a lie, and is how people take things personally. You make these fictional causes and pretend they're affecting you, or that other people are talking about you, or they're hurting you, or they're attacking you. You cannot be attacked unless you attack yourself. You cannot be sick unless you make yourself sick. You cannot die unless you make yourself dead. And this is what the forgiveness boils down to. If it's a process, forgiveness is not really a process, but when you do your process of purification, all you need to do is stop projecting these ideas of something else is causing me, another brother's to blame, you're the sinner and I'm not. That's all fake causality. They're free. You're free. You are free of them. They're not causing you. They're not your father. They're not your son. God is your father, and you are his son, and you have sons that you've created, but that's not your brothers. That's your children. So the only thing you got to do then is simply acknowledge my freedom. I'm not at the effect of anything else on this level. There are no causes in the world. My brother is not the sinner that's causing me to suffer. I cannot die against my will. The body cannot become sick on its own through an external cause. The only thing I'm experiencing is what's coming out of my projection from my mind. My body is the projection of my mind. If I don't make it suffer, it will not suffer. If I don't make it attacked and dead, it is not going to be attacked and dead. Therefore, I don't have to die. I don't have to be suffering and in pain. All I need to do is cancel out the ego's idea of causes that make other things happen against their will. Acknowledge our free will. I'm free of your free will. You're free of my free will. I'm responsible for every choice that I make, and I'm fully responsible for having to choose the atonement. And if I choose it, and if you don't choose it, my choice does not affect your choice. It does not wake you up. It does not heal you. It does not stop you from being sick. I can only offer, you can only offer something to somebody as a teaching or as a healing or as a gift of love or miracle. You can offer it, but they can refuse it. And sometimes miracles are not given because people don't receive them. If you don't want to receive, God can't help you. I think in the Bible or something it says something like, God helps those who help themselves. This is the same principle. You have to freely, willingly, as a co-creator, choose to want to do God's will. Otherwise, God can't help you. I have to choose to sit here in the car and talk about the truth in order for God's angels in heaven to come and support me and help me to give the message. I have to sort of give my free will to flow this way, and then heaven comes along and gives its free will and supports my will, and together we produce a mutual outcome in agreement that can be miraculous and filled with truth. So that's how co-creation works. It's cooperation. It's not coercion, and it's not tyranny, and it's not being dominating. You've got to let go of everybody else. You've got to let them have their stupid decisions and their mistakes, and stop judging them for it, and stop making them wrong for it, because you're denying their freedom, and that denies your freedom, and then you can't be at peace and free, and you can't be free of every form of suffering. You can't be invulnerable unless you acknowledge that you are free. Your freedom makes you free from the ego. It makes you free from this world, from the body, from death, from the separation. It means you are choosing to do God's will. You're using your mind in its natural state to extend heaven's creation freely and willingly as a co-creator, participant, voluntarily, because it brings you joy and because you're in agreement with heaven's ways, rather than saying, I want something else, I want to will against my will, I'm going to suppress myself, deny myself, try to make myself unconscious and dead. It's not a very good choice. It does lead to a dream. It does lead to the possibility of a dream. It has led to the tiny mad idea. The separation idea has happened, but it's an idea of impossibilities, so it's not really happened, but the idea happened. And having that idea only happened, or you only believed in it because you were free to choose whether to believe it's true or not. You don't have to choose that. Jesus said, if you had simply decided not to go along with it and had not believed in it, it would have been over in the twinkling of an eye. Nothing forcing you to be here, nothing's keeping you here except yourself. And that's the key to how you go home. You hold the key, you go there, and you open the door. Say, hey God, I'm home. And he's like, finally, let's have a party. and then let's go help other people who would have not yet chosen to come back to the sonship. Help them, bring the atonement to them, give them miracles, help them to heal, go out and enlighten their minds to help us all come back to the sonship together willingly, only because people want to. You can't make people choose it, and you can't force them to choose it. This is also why miracles can't be used to induce belief, which would be making them a spectacle, because you can't force somebody to believe something. And sometimes people argue and put up defenses and don't want truth and don't want what you're saying, so you just have to sort of let it go. Let them get on with it. If they choose and they want to be mistaken because they're all wrong and I'm right, then you just got to let go and let them have that freedom. And maybe it's not their time. Maybe they're not ready for it. Maybe they just need to go through other processes. Maybe what they're doing is working for them right now, and you just got to let it be, even if that means they're into non-duality or some kind of mix of course in Christianity or Buddhism or something else. Unless you let them have that freedom, you don't get the freedom. So then you start fighting and you start having a war with yourself. And now you've lost your peace, so let it all go. Let it go. Let those people make their wrong choices. And as long as you have the responsibility to choose the atonement for yourself, and you choose it because you want to, and you see it makes sense, and you're willing to because you don't see any other reason not to, you're like, okay, yes. And then you say yes to God, and then you receive from God because you're willing to receive. You receive miracles, and then you also are willing to give them to others, because if you're willing to be loved and worthy and accept miracles for yourself, accept your innocence, that it's true that you're still innocent because you didn't sin, you're also willing for that to be true of everyone, and that automatically makes you want to go help everybody and bring them the same miracles. And now you can give the miracles that you've received, and you can only give the miracles you've received, so you have to be willing to receive first. You receive some atonement, you get the powers of God, the gifts of God come to you, and then you give them to others. And you help in the Great Crusade to wake everybody up and get everybody back home, but not with a freaking whip, not with a cane, not with a not with a gun. Offer the truth, but allow freedom and let go and let God, and we're all free together. There's total allowing, total peace, total acceptance. We all get there eventually anyway. It's just a matter of when you choose and how you choose to get there. So, freedom, guaranteed. It's permanent. You have perfect free will forever. God is not going to oppose it. God's not going to force you to wake up. You got to have a little willingness. I want this. I choose this. I accept it and I receive it and I allow it and I acknowledge myself and my freedom. I am a free-willed being of God and I've been created to be free. I think I better stop because I'm going to run out of room. So God bless and see you soon. Be free.